You got my goods?
Yeah, man. I got your goods.
Well, where they at?
You got my money?
Yeah, I got your money.
Well, since this item is in such low supply and high demand, I'm gonna need to double the price.
What you talking about, fool? Doubling the price? Ah, alright, just give me my 50 biscuits.
Sweet.
Oh, no, it's the law.
The law of supply and demand. All right, those out there in digital landscape of the digital world, it is I, the one caught in the digital prison, the bringer of knowledge, the slinger of info, Mr. Cruz. And as you might have guessed, we are talking about today as supply and demand. We thank our guests, P Funk and the Quiet One, uh, and thank you for their skit. So let's get on with this. Supply, the quality of a good or service that producers are willing and able to sell at various prices during a specific time period. So this is how much of something you got. You know, how much of it is there and how much of it you're willing to sell over a certain time period. Demand, the different quantities of a good or service that buyers are willing and able to purchase at various prices during a specific time period. Now notice there's some key things in here. Buying that buyers are willing and able to purchase. Okay, just because I want that new Xbox One or that PlayStation 4, I might not have the money to purchase it. I might not have that extra, 5Gs just to throw down on it. Be like, well, actually not 5Gs, but you know what I'm saying. Uh, I don't have all that extra money just to throw down on it. So it's like I am not able to purchase it. So that demand does not count in the supply and demand. Okay. So it has to be a demand of people who are actually willing and able to purchase this item. Okay. Now, supply and demand, as you heard in our skit, influences price. And don't forget to factor in time. Okay, this is a little model uh, that you get to see. Here's quantity, your price, your supply, and your demand. Okay, the larger the supply, the more quantity of an item you have. Uh, the lower um, and the higher the demand is usually the lower of the quantity. And there is a point right here that we'll talk more specifically about, but this is where it balances out. This is that perfect point in which supply and demand equal out. That everybody who wants one is getting it, and that there is no surpluses or shortages. Okay, so um, this is a supply and demand chart. Now, the flip side of this, not only is price influenced, but it also influences supply and demand. Okay, so if this item is worth a lot of money, all right, let's go back to our Xbox One or PlayStation 4s. They just came out. They're $400 and $500 for each. So I don't want to spend $400 or $500 for a gaming system. I'm comfortably waiting until they drop down another $100 in a year when I can buy them then. And a lot of the bugs have been worked out. So price affects consumers consuming it and producers in producing it. Because if something's high price, man, producers want to produce the stuff so they can sell it at a high price in order to gain that large money from it. If something is selling at a low price, well, they're less likely to be motivated in order to sell it or to produce it because they're not making much money off of it. And vice versa for consumers. Consumers usually want to buy stuff at low prices and don't want to buy it at high prices. Um, Quantity supplied. The amount that sellers are willing and able to sell at a specific price. Okay, so a producer could produce more of it, but if they produce a whole lot more, then that might change the price. So they're only willing to produce a certain amount that will sell at this price. They don't want to overflood the market because then there'll be people will see that there's more supply, and so the price will have to go down. Um, I think of a great example. I watched the show American Pickers, and they were somewhere, and I don't remember exactly what it was they picked. I think it was some signs, and uh, they bought like 10 of them, and they're like, well, we'll have to put these out one at a time, uh, so that we don't, flood the market with them, and all of a sudden the prices go down on them. So uh, these are things that producers and consumers take into mind. Okay, supply. Let's focus on supply for a minute. The supply schedule. Okay, these are examples of supply schedules. There is a table showing the relationship between prices and the quantity supplied. Okay, that as prices go up, uh, supply will change. You can look at this one here is talking about the wage rate. If at different points it increases, uh, and the hours worked increase or decrease based on that. Prices of houses. You can look the higher the price of the house goes up, uh, the higher or the more quantity of houses that are produced. But you can see that there's a point at which the growth of quantity shrinks compared to the growth of price. Okay, so there is a spot that it all balances out. So as price goes up, supply goes up. Producers want to capitalize on these higher prices, as we mentioned earlier. In the supply curve, it's the graph of a supply schedule. All right, so let's look at demand. Demand schedule works the same way as the supply, but it's for demand. And the lower the price, the more consumers buy. As we've already discussed a little bit, that if we lower the price, I'm going to sell more. That's why sometimes you see, gas stations. That's the first thing that comes to mind. They will sell gas a couple of cents cheaper than their neighbors. Well, they figure the few cents I'm losing, I'm going to get more people in here because people are going to go pull into the one that has the cheaper gas. And this happens in a lot of things. You'll see something that is priced just under a certain amount or just under the rest of them so that it will sell more. And because consumers tend to buy the cheaper prices or the lower prices. Supply and demand. Now, supply and demand curve graph is a graph that's showing the intersection of supply curve and the demand curve. It shows how these interact. You can see quantity, price. You can see as the supply goes up here, the demand's going down. So the higher the supply. And here's that equilibrium point that we discussed. It's that perfect point where the price is right, the quantity's right, the demand's all right. So everything's being met. But things don't always reach that equilibrium. But that's the point it all strives to hit. And the market, if left to operate on its own, helps regulate, and a lot of the times it will eventually get maybe not to this equilibrium, but within a marginal difference of this equilibrium. That there is a little, extra, or there's a little shortage, but um, it balances itself out. Um, and then sometimes, you get other outside interferences that try to regulate this. Um, and you can see over here as well, supply and demand and different points, where quantity and everything uh, plays in. And as we mentioned, equilibrium price is the price at which quantity supplied equals quantity demanded. So this is kind of how the law of supply and demand works. The more supply there is, the more the less demand tends to go down because there's a whole lot more of it. Uh, but the more demand, usually supply goes down because it's being used, and the higher the demand it's been taken, so there starts becoming shortages. So surplus is when you have more supply than you do demand. Shortage is where you have more demand than you do supply. All right. So until next time, deuces.